Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the lunch. We still good and loud? Yeah, okay. Yeah, good. Just before I get into my comments, so amazing morning. And there was a couple of you that mentioned that you were cold, so we have turned the heat up a little bit, so hopefully it's warmed up a little bit, and we're going to try to keep the door closed to keep the drafts down. And so if you're still cold, after I come off the stage, come and see me, and we can bump up the heat a little bit further. We don't want to make it too warm. You'll be sleeping through the afternoon presentations, but we could make it a little bit warmer if we need to. So I'm going to do things a little bit out of order here, and which is why I've come back up. Wanted to do a few thank yous. I may not be here exactly at closing, because I actually, thank you. I actually have another responsibility, which is I'm the executive director of the Tim Hortons Children's Foundation. And I got a call from the board chair that I have to attend a meeting between 3 and 4, so I may have to pop out for a few minutes. So if I'm not back in time, Janet Dassinger will be here to close the meeting. Thank you. Is that good? So I pardon me, wanted to get a few of my thank yous out. Plus, we have a bigger group of attendees here at this stage anyways. So, first of all, huge effort to make these conferences go. And so we had a new conference organizer this year, and her name is Jessica Deacon. And I was asking Jessica, I knew she works for Bird Studies Canada, but I didn't actually know what she did for Bird Studies Canada, and she's done an amazing job of organizing our event. In conversation, I actually found out that she's Dr. Jessica Deacon, recently received her PhD in biology, and she works on songbird migration, and she comes from Western University, so not only is she a fabulous event organizer, but she's a pretty smart individual, and she's adding to things. So let's give Jessica a huge round of applause. So how about that, Brian? Our conference is now being led by a doctor. So I think that's pretty amazing. I want to thank all the presenters this morning and the ones that I know are coming up this afternoon. I think the quality of the presentations is high, and every year, we're just thrilled with those that come out. And by the way, Dr. Deakins is already signed up to be our first presenter for our 14th annual conference, now that we know her secret. And so she's on the agenda for 2026. I want to thank all the conservation group attendees, past and present. And if you wouldn't mind, I didn't want to miss anybody, but it's a pretty blue ribbon group of attendees, so that any of the conservation groups that are represented in leadership or present, past or present, please stand up. Don't be bashful. Yeah. Repeat, standing up. So there's Wendy, and I knew Stu and Peter, and Michael Bradstreet is here, and again, I didn't want to miss anybody, but in my other life, we would refer to these individuals as captains of industry, and they truly are captains of industry in conservation in Norfolk County. So let's give them a round of applause for being here and the work that they've done. Also want to thank the team at Long Point Eco Adventures. You heard this morning about the incredible work that we've been doing, led by Lauren and Carrie in turtles and reptile, reducing reptile mortality. But there's a business partner, Long Point Eco Adventures, that has really stepped up in a major way in partnering with us on so many different things. But one of the things that it's now become a signature for us is the turtle egg display that's actually in the summer, and it's amazing. It's incredible how many people stop by, and so I wanted to give the team at Long Point Eco Adventure some recognition because the partnership is fabulous and growing. Another partnership that we're quite proud of is, it's been a couple of years now, but we have a working relationship with the University of Waterloo, and it's the School of Environment, Resources, and Sustainability. And so we signed an MOU with them a couple of years ago, and they've had researchers in our area working on various levels of their education. The department operates under the direction of Dr. Derek Armitage, and we actually will be taking on a new board member later today, Dr. Andrew Trent, who is going to be joining our board and also works in the school. So thank you to the Waterloo Group and all you do for this area, and it's an amazing partnership. So round of applause for that group. Now, we've talked about the biosphere and a point in time. So I've been involved with the biosphere between 5 and 6 years. Again, I looked around the room, and there's a number of people here that have served in the past on the biosphere. There's some past presidents, there's some past chairs, there's some board members. So I'm going to have that group stand up. And Val, get out. Brian and Dolph, and we've got some amazing people that have done tremendous work. They were involved, and they stay involved, and they keep coming back in so many different ways to support what we do. One of my favorite people to recognize, and I do it every year, I'm going to say that he's probably the most senior member in the room, and someone that was the original vice chair or vice president of the biosphere back in 1984. He had a incredible history and career in forestry, and that's Mr. Dolph Winia. Dolph, stand up and take a bow. Now, Dolph did tell me that I was trying to recall exactly when he moved into Ontario, a bit about his career, and he was reminding me the story that in 1908, the first forestry station was established, and I asked him if he led it. He said, wait a minute, 1908? How old do you think I am? So he wasn't quite there, but anyways, he knew the people that did. So Dolph, it's always a pleasure, and this is Dolph's 13th conference with us, so we appreciate you and Ann always supporting us and being a part of this. And then we've got our board members, our current board members. There's many of them in the room. There's currently 8 board members. We've got the 3 new board members that will be coming on this evening. And but the existing board members that are here, if you wouldn't mind standing up and being recognized, because our board is fully volunteer, and these are people that roll up their sleeves and make things happen. So congratulations and thank you to that group. So just a couple of housekeeping things, and I'll get out of the way, and we'll get back to the programming. We have our AGM coming up on Monday, November 24th. We'll be releasing that invitation announcement on Monday, so Monday, November 24th at Bird Studies Canada between 5 and 6. So if you're a member, of course, you're welcome to attend. If you're not a member, the public service announcement here is go to Long Point Biosphere Region, and on the front page there's a button that says Become a Member. And for $35, you can become a member of the Biosphere. We'd love to have you become a member, and you get all of our communications, and gives you kind of the inside baseball on how else you can become involved with our Biosphere board, or as a volunteer at programming, or whatever it may be. But have a look if you have interested in joining us in a more formal way. So with that, I'm going to introduce Brian, if you want to come up. So Mr. Brian Craig has also been with the Biosphere for a long, long time. He doesn't date quite back as long as Dolph does to 1908, but he's been with us for a long time, and he serves on the board. He also serves in the role of past president. He's our historian and a guy that just brings tremendous knowledge to this Biosphere, and he's been, certainly in my time, in this role. He's been, my partner in crime to be sure that we keep things on track. So, Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tom. I trust that you all enjoyed your lunch and would like to give a hand to our local restaurant, the Country Fork. So I have the great pleasure and privilege of introducing our keynote speaker, Scott Gillingwater, a good friend, a good conservationist. And what did you send here? Scott Gillingwater is a respected Canadian herpetologist.
I didn't send that.
You didn't send that? It's much more than respected. He has been working his whole career. A lot down here in Long Point, but something that I wanted to raise as well is Scott has been incubating spiny softshell eggs, a turtle, very rare turtle, and he is responsible for the first time in 100 years that the population of spiny softshells is going up on the Thames River. And for your work in Long Point and for your work you do, also you steward a 50-acre property and you put in snake fencing and you've restored it. But anyways, without further ado, we look forward to your presentation, Scott.
Thanks, Brian. All right, thanks everybody. Is this on, I assume? I usually don't use a mic because my voice is usually irritatingly loud when I'm in small venues. So if I'm too loud or too quiet, just do something. When I first put this presentation together, I will admit there was 365 slides, about an hour of video. Knowing that that was not sustainable, I started hacking. And it did lose a lot of the stories, the emotion that goes into the work that I do and some of the science as well. But I wanted to encapsulate 30 years of my work in the Long Point area and the Norfolk County area. So I'll do my best to still make it as engaging as possible, giving tidbits of information, a bit of the science, but I also want to make it a presentation about emotion, about the feeling, about the need to care about these animals beyond science. Without people that dedicate themselves, without going all in, we don't have any chance of recovering many of our species at risk. So hopefully that comes through a little bit in this presentation. So I will see if this works and go from there. So I will admit that I did miss some of the early presentations, have a bit of an issue with my pup. So she allowed me a good 55 minutes of sleep last night. So if I stare blankly for a few minutes, you'll know what happened. All right, I don't think that's going to work, so we will use the laptop. Okay, so I think this quote encapsulates a lot of how I feel about the world. I've often called myself an optimistic pessimist or a pessimistic optimist. I always have a little bit of hope, but I know things aren't great. Whether it's current government legislation, whether it's the many threats that these species face, limited funding, all these things that get thrown upon researchers and conservationists. However, if we didn't care, if we didn't have a little bit of hope, this work wouldn't happen and the positive changes wouldn't come along with it. So to start off with a little bit about Ontario and some of our species. So there are 26 native reptiles, 17 snakes, 8 turtles, and 1 lizard in Ontario. 19 of these species are designated as at risk. 8 of our 8 turtles, either federally or provincially. 11 of our 16 snakes, 1 is already gone, and our only lizard. And I'm going to highlight turtles a little bit throughout this presentation because they are more susceptible than some of our other taxa that we have globally. So with that being said, worldwide, about 61% of turtles are endangered. They don't jive well with modern humans. And I'll give you a little overview of why that is the case. These are not cottontails. They don't reach maturity at a year and reproduce rapidly. They take many, many years to reach maturity. So that late age maturity in some species, such as Blanding's turtles and snapping turtles, could be as late as 18 to 20 years before they can lay their first clutch of eggs. There's also low juvenile to adult recruitment rate. So, this is an animal that has been pre-programmed through evolution to live a long time. So if the majority of its nests are lost, not that big a deal. If the majority of the hatchlings are lost, not that big a deal. We've got time. We've got decades. We've got, maybe a century to replace myself in the population. So I'm going to be a turtle, move slowly, avoid all the things that I can, but my shell will hopefully do the rest and protect me from a lot of the predators. So that worked for millions of years, and turtles did very, very well. And unfortunately, when humans come into the picture, we have thrown that evolution or that long-lived life history into a spiral, because we are now ensuring that large numbers of the adults are lost. So now they don't have the same amount of time they used to have to replace themselves in the population. So not only that, but the adults, in addition to having extreme issues, extreme dangers facing them, it is also the eggs and the hatchlings have an increased rate of loss as well because of things that humans have caused or things that humans do. So humans like to collect, humans like to mess around with fossil fuels and cause climate issues. Humans love to drive in their vehicles and run over turtles, intentionally or unintentionally. And all of these factors have meant that the turtle life history that was so effective for millions of years is suddenly not effective anymore. This is why 61% of the world's turtles are now at risk. They just can't deal with these new modern issues that are impacting them. So I generally say in my talks that it's humans that have caused a problem, and now it's humans that need to solve that problem. We're not the greatest at solving that problem. We're doing our best, and in small, incremental opportunities, we're doing some good, but we need to do more. This is one of the most at-risk groups of animals on the planet. So with that being said, Norfolk County does have 7 of the 8 Ontario species of turtle, as well as 2 non-native species, red-eared slider and the eastern box turtle that can survive our winters. And we found both in the county. They're not as big an issue as some people might worry a slider or a non-native box turtle to be. However, they aren't supposed to be here. We also have approximately 12 species of snake in the county. I think there's 11 on the slide there that are found a little more readily. I think there's an old ringneck snake record or two, but for the most part, that's a good number of snakes compared to what is seen in the province. And so in order to protect both the turtles and the snakes, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So I'll give you a little bit of background on Southern Ontario at-risk reptiles, which is the group that I created based on my work since 1994. So SOAR, or Southern Ontario At-Risk Reptiles, is kind of the umbrella name for all of my work through the conservation authorities, through my freelance herpetological work in Southern Ontario. And I wanted to group it to show this is an organization that has had long-term impacts and long-term feet on the ground in Southern Ontario. So the research and conservation work has included all 8 of Ontario's native turtles, as well as 1 non-native species that we study in detail to understand them better. Most of the province's snakes, and we also do some work with amphibians and also birds. And birds are pretty much reptiles, so it's okay. So my reptile and amphibian work in Norfolk County began in 1996, and it has continued for the past 3 decades. My reptile research and conservation efforts have included large-scale mark recapture efforts, research into habitat needs, behavior, threats, toxin accumulation, disease, reproduction, nest protection, radiotelemetry, road mortality mitigation, and public education. So as many things as I could throw into the research over the years has been part of this work. But if we want to back it up a little bit to the 1980s, early 1980s, this is me in rural Oxford County. I grew up in a small farm town, and around me there were wetlands, there were some woodlands, and whenever my mom turned her back, I would beeline it for the nearest wetland, so 2 years old, 3 years old and up. And eventually they realized that this kid just has an affection for wildlife, for wild areas, and my mom especially was very good at accommodating that and ensuring that I was able to take in all this nature as best I could. However, in the bottom left picture, I was probably maybe 8 or 9, and they started draining some of the wetlands around our property. This caused a mass migration of turtles out of the wetlands. They were getting killed on roads. They were dying in fields because there were no good wetlands nearby. And for a kid whose entire life was turtles, reptiles and wildlife, absolutely, but turtles especially, this absolutely crushed me. So we had turtles in the basement being rehabbed from issues of road mortality or road injury. Maybe feeding them ham and under a poor light was not the best scenario, but when you're 9 in the 80s, that's all you know, and we actually pulled a few through. And so this started my conservation ethic in my brain, and I just couldn't see this happening, and it made me have this incredibly strong sense of justice for the underdog, and turtles were the ultimate underdog. And so in 1994, I lucked out, and because everything I knew about turtles and reptiles, I put into this interview that I had to survey the entire Thames and Sydenham River looking for spiny softshell turtles, which very little information was known about them. And so it was the dream job, and it led to both myself and Michelle Fletcher in that photo, applying for additional funding and keeping it going. And over the years, started adding additional wildlife species in additional areas. And in 1996, I had my first year at 21 years old at Long Point working out at the tip with softshell turtles, but realizing almost no information was known about many of the reptiles in Long Point proper. There had been a few old studies here and there, so I carefully documented all species. I would go up and down every dune, through every slough, through every wetland, hiking tens, dozens of kilometers every day in order to see and understand the point as best I could. I would have a tiny little water bottle in my pocket that would be gone in the first 20 minutes. And by the end of the day, in the heat in the dunes, I'd be sucking juice out of wild strawberries trying to survive, contemplating drinks out of Lake Erie. But this is how I felt about this place and these species. I knew somehow at that time that just wasn't enough known about these animals. And it was up to me to try and figure this out and be a problem solver. Over the years, I've been able to meet up with some great folks, Mary Garchor, Peter Carson, Mike Oldham, even you, Michael, and Michael Bradstreet, Jane Bowles, David Green, who have all done work out in Norfolk County and in many ways have mentored me in a lot of the things I did. And I always say that you don't consider yourself a researcher unless you've been mooned by Jane Bowles out at the tip of Long Point as the boat goes by. And I won't mention the nicknames that Michael had for Lucas and I out at the point. I don't think I can mention them here at all, but it just was a great community of people who cared a lot about the point, who cared a lot about Norfolk County, and dedicated their lives to doing this work. And so countless times on May 2-4 weekends and July 1st weekends when we're all working at the tip, we would have to get together, have a few drinks, and I think it was pretty much standard that you had to pee off the end of the point whenever you had to go. And that's just how life was with this community of researchers, which was a lot smaller back then, but has been growing since. So after that, first couple years at the point, my interest, my energy grew for these species, for this area, and I started looking at many of these species in greater detail. I started getting a crew together to come out with me to do large marker capture efforts, to do blood sampling, to do radiotelemetry, to do habitat creation. In the pictures you can see some snake hibernacula being built. Me measuring a snapping turtle in the back of a boat where we did blood sampling to look at toxin levels. And so a number of programs that we were able to work at over the past 30 years to really get to know these species better. And I will say it made it a little easier having my wife work with me for a lot of that time because when you're a researcher and you're fully dedicated to this stuff, you leave often at 7 in the morning and get back at midnight, depending on the species you work with. And that's not sustainable in a lot of relationships unless your wife's out there working with you. So that worked out very well. And we were able to stay out at the Canadian Wildlife Service research cabins to even stay at some locals' cottages over the years, closer to the base of the point. And so we had this amazing opportunity to study these animals in detail for maybe the first time along the point with more than just a presence-absence study. And so this is very helpful in knowing where these animals were, what the threats were, and what's going on with the habitat, and how we can look at these animals in the global context, in the provincial context, and in the regional local context. So part of the work that we did was also radio telemetry, and we attach a crude radio transmitter to the back of a soft-shell turtle. And at one point, soft-shell turtles were moving so much they can move 30, 40 kilometers in a season, and it was almost impossible to find these animals. So we had to hire a pilot to fly a four-seater Cessna airplane. And what was interesting is that the pilot was talking. So we had the earphones and the mics with us, and he was arguing with his supervisor. And the supervisor was saying that the mechanism for attaching the antenna was not legal. It was dangerous to fly, and we didn't know what to do with that information. So the look on my wife's face was pretty much that the entire flight, in between barfing because she doesn't do well with motion. So regardless, this flight was incredible, the first one anyway, as we were able to fly very close over the point and see some of the habitats that we'd been on foot for many years. There's the research cabin from CWS, and get a different perspective of how these systems, these dune sluice systems, were created. So this, again, was just another little bit of information to put into the vault to understand Long Point. But on the ground is where I think is my bread and butter, where I really understand these species better when I can approach them, when I can be in the habitats where they are. And I will say that the tip of Long Point is one of the most incredible places I've ever been to in my life. And anyone who's worked out there knows what I mean. And it's unlike any other place. And although I've done a lot of work near the base, and especially more recently, all of it I love, but the tip of Long Point is definitely a highlight. So our surveys over the past 30 years have included searches in over about 8,000 acres of Long Point, as well as multiple sites inland, which aren't listed in the map there. Thousands of kilometers of marsh walked on foot, large areas covered by boat and plane, and I suspect I intimately know these wetlands better than almost anyone in Canada, and with that creates a need for me to share that information, to use that information in a way that will help wildlife that I work with. So some of the places that I've worked: Long Point National Wildlife Area, Big Creek National Wildlife Area, Crown Marsh, Long Point Provincial Park, private land, St. Williams Conservation Reserve, etc. And all of it has a special place in my heart and in the work that I do. It's one of the longest running and most successful reptile research programs in Canada. And we have been able to surpass some of the US studies in terms of number of species that we are working with and getting to know in these environments. So just because we're in Canada, which is often seen as the northern border of the range of some of these reptile species, we still have populations that are so important to the global population that we need to really understand them here, and in terms of global climate change and where they may go, and if they have the ability to go further north as the climate warms. So our results benefit these species nationally and internationally. And after 12 years on Kasiwik, my time on Casero, my time chairing and member of various recovery teams, I was able to really use the information I gathered from the wild and put it into use into the legislation, into the recovery process. And at every step of the way, I highlighted Long Point and the need for understanding of Long Point, conservation of Long Point, and how it reflects the conservation of reptiles in Canada. I can't do this and couldn't do this without unbelievable crew members and a huge network of folks that I've been able to bring out with me. They have to be trustworthy. There's a lot of sensitive areas, sensitive species. And so over time, you create this network of people who care very deeply. And they also are folks that go into positions of power later. And not that these people were my crew members on the next slide, but these are also other folks that I met along the way. Rick Levick, Stu, Audrey Heege, so many folks, Brian Craig, John Everett, and so many people that care so deeply about this area and have worked very hard to ensure that the species that they're focused on or the communities of wildlife can be protected long term. And that even includes some of our government folks. Danny Bernard has been a constant in the Long Point area for many, many years. Before that, Paul Ashley, Jeff Robinson, and so many others that have helped with getting me out to sites, helping with advice, helping with ensuring that things move slowly or smoothly and I don't kill myself, which is often a pretty typical thing that almost happens every year. So for the rest of this presentation, I want you to think about a couple things. And you may have heard these terms before, but I think it's very relevant for this presentation. So shifting baseline. Get that in your head and understand that it means, at least in how I interpret it for this presentation. So when you are growing up, you have a woodlot beside you, maybe cornfields on the other side. So as you get older, you see that woodlot start to become impacted by development. You want to protect that woodlot. You want to conserve what you grew up with understanding as important for nature. However, shifting baseline is such that we only know what we know. We need to maybe conserve some of these areas, what our great-great-grandparents understood or what our great-great-grandparents saw. That is where we'll get true protection. And sure, we have farms, we have urban areas, we have roads, and we need all of that. We're humans, we need to survive, but we need to do it in a way that's going to be positive for local wildlife, create corridors between green spaces, and all the things that we need to do to ensure wildlife protection. We can't just view it in our lifetime. We need to view it further back. So that shifting baseline is very important to keep in your mind. And also cumulative impacts. We hear about road mortality. Yeah, that's bad. It's very bad. It could decrease populations. But what about in areas without roads? The species probably doing okay. What about invasive species moving into those areas? Well, that's pretty bad too, but it's not everywhere. What about illegal collection? Yeah, that's pretty bad, but it's not everywhere. When you start adding up all of these cumulative impacts, this is why we are losing species. This is why when you see me, on the media or in an email you don't want to get, it's because I worry so much about these species and these cumulative impacts that I'm seeing it. I'm working with these species on a daily basis. What you're seeing is one impact here and there when you're not working with these animals. But when you work with them, you see this cumulative impact. And also there's historic and even present disregard for anything that can't be used or profited off by humans. So keep that in mind as we talk about some of the species today. So why are reptiles declining? I talked a little bit about some of the impacts. This is just a short list. Habitat loss, damage, fragmentation and alteration, vehicle mortality, collection for pets, food and medicine, persecution, non-native plants and animals, land management activities, subsidized predators, climate change, pollution, disease, and the list goes on and on and on. So I often tell people, if we were to cut that list in half, we will still likely lose a lot of the species that we have here in Ontario, the most susceptible reptile species especially, but many of our even common species will start to decrease in number. If we cut that list to maybe 1/3, we may still lose a lot of these species depending on the threat that's left. However, it's this cumulative impact that will cause the decline and demise of many of our species that don't adapt well to humans. So I'll go over a few of these threats. Poaching, angling, persecution, boating. Again, one or two here and there. You might lose a few animals. Might not seem like that big a deal, but again, that cumulative impact. This is Blanding's turtle, endangered federally, threatened provincially, killed by propeller hits from a boat. These are turtles that have been hooked. So a snapping turtle on the left, softshell turtle on the right. Bottom left is a painted turtle, bottom right is a softshell. So you can see the hooks in the two upper photos. The hook in the painted turtle went in through the mouth and out through the eye. A little harder to see in the photo. The softshell turtle on the bottom right was found tied to a tree with the hook embedded in its throat and bludgeoned to death. So these animals don't just simply have a hook that's cut, which can lead to its loss, demise. So I always tell people, don't cut the hook. You got to bring that turtle to a vet if you can't get the hook out yourself. Some hooks can pass to a turtle, many don't. And a lot of ghost hooks end up getting wrapped around the shell or the feet and drowning the animal. So hooks are a very big issue. However, there's a lot more going on. So we also had a softshell turtle many years ago along the Thames River. We could see a fishing line coming out of its mouth, so we grabbed her when she was on the nesting beach, brought her in to get x-rays, and what we found was that there was something that looked like lead waders in a couple different parts of her body. And the vet's like, well, this doesn't make sense to where her organs are. So when she went in for surgery, realized that she had been shot in the shoulder and had been shattered, a shot in the liver, as well as hooked. Probably two different isolated incidences. So this is the kind of life that many turtles are experiencing these days. So I always say, if there is anything such as reincarnation, don't come back as a turtle. It's a rough go. A few more photos. So the upper left and right, both snapping turtles that were shot. You can see the bullet hole in the head. The center snapping turtle was hit by a propeller. The lower left, another shot from a gun, which we'll talk a bit more later. And the bottom right is a female snapping turtle coming up to nest and was bludgeoned to death. So I don't like just showing all these gory pictures without context. There's a reason, I show them. And I try not to go too overboard. But years ago, I used to do talks, and people would come up to me after the talk, and I would talk about all the positive things, not show any of these gruesome photos. And people would say, well, good job, keep up the good work. And when I started talking about the reality that these animals face, the situations that they find themselves in, and showing the reality of it, people would come up to me and say, well, good work. Is there anything I can do? And that was a big change in how people viewed their position in this world and how they can assist in wildlife protection. This is an eastern hognose snake, bludgeoned to death, left on the front yard of a cottage to basically highlight that this he-man had killed a hognose snake. Ooh, that is going to be rough. I'm going to go a little over time, so I'm going to talk a little faster. So this is all about issues that impact these animals. So there's indiscriminate loss of these animals through persecution. We also have a legal collection for food, pets, and medicine. And this is something that is worldwide. And many of the issues that these animals face are substantial to the point where some of the animals go for thousands of dollars each when they're sent around the world. So we can't even tell people where we find some of these animals from our research studies. There's also historic harvest and lasting impact on snapping turtles. In the Long Point area in the early 1900s, thousands of pounds of turtles a week were shipped to the U.S. Hundreds of animals a week were being taken out. There's no way you can find this many snapping turtles in the Long Point area anymore. So these historic harvest levels were so significant that over 100 years later, they've still impacted the local population. Disease, snake fungal disease, ranavirus, herpes virus, we're finding in a lot of our turtle populations. We were the first to find ranavirus in Norfolk County in turtles. And this is something that could be a long-term issue and significant for these animals. Of course, improper farming practices can impact not only wildlife, but also people. Habitat loss, damage, fragmentation. The list goes on. When we look across the landscape, our environment is bisected by roads. Habitat is lost. This old map shows everything in orange is where habitat has been manipulated by humans and less natural areas exist. You see a few white spots, and that's good. You see Long Point and Norfolk County, a lot more green, but there's also issues in those green spaces. This is a community forest that has Jefferson salamander, black rat snake, spotted turtle, and Blanding's turtle, and it is still heavily logged with roads going through and impacting the sites where the animals are found. So even in green spaces, there are still a large number of threats. There's also land management alteration decisions that often neglect cryptic species such as reptiles. So our team has found significant damage in many areas, and this can include major manipulation, alteration of sensitive habitats for generalist species or for easy human access. So more often than not, it's good-intentioned people that don't understand the biology and ecology of some of our reptiles at risk. So careful planning and dialogue needs to happen, and communication before some of these projects are carried out. When red flags are raised, it's best if we can get together and talk about the situation instead of just moving on forward because we have the funding and the permits for it. So we must put the needs of a species in critical decline above politics and ensure that we work together. Our aim has always been to talk to people to ensure that we work cohesively in order to solve some of these problems. Some of the problems that impact that we don't have a lot of say in is invasive plants. So Phragmites australis has decimated many of our wetlands, and a few photos show the difference. So these are photos that I took over the years in 2003 and 2013, the exact same site. So a major change over a 10-year period from open marsh habitat to dense monoculture of Phragmites. Some of my pictures from the tip of Long Point from 1996 to 2016, major changes in how these ecosystems now function because of this non-native plant. This is Duncan's Pond at the tip of, near the tip of Long Point, Gravelly Bay area, 1997 and 2017. Again, Duncan's Pond, 2004, 2016. All of these just show the major changes that one plant can cause and the negative impacts. From 96 to 2017, we went from plenty of areas for soft-shell turtles to nest to almost none. And this is something that is being dealt with, even in some of the internal inland areas of Long Point. There's some work being done to get rid of Phragmites because it does overtake the most important habitat for many of our reptiles at risk, as well as our birds, mammals, etc. And again, this monoculture is not something that any of these animals have ever experienced in their lives or evolved with. And although common, less common, never assume turtles will not be in dense stands of Phragmites because they do use it. And for that reason, we have found that some Phragmites removal techniques can impact reptiles at risk. So we just say, let's work with the taxa experts to ensure that we can find ways to implement strategies to protect the sites, remove the Phragmites, and ensure that some of our reptiles at risk are safeguarded. Road mortality, I talked about briefly. One of the biggest threats to many of our species. A lot of intentional road mortality happens. This is a snapping turtle. It's hard to see the track where the truck went off the road. She was nesting at the time and hit. This is a painted turtle that was hit. You can see the track over her. And this snapping turtle was found. We saw the truck drive over her and speed off. He had to swerve his truck in a way to almost ditch his truck in order to hit this turtle. We ended up staying with the turtle instead of chasing him down, which legally might have been a better option for me. And unfortunately, we end up with a scenario where an animal that could be 60, 70, 80 years old is now gone and removed from the breeding population. So we talked about a skull earlier. I was going to tell you a little more about this female. This is her skull. After she passed away, we went back and grabbed her skull. We noticed there was a hole in the side and realized there was some bits of bullet inside. So she had been shot, but a lot of calcium and bone had built up around the wound where she was shot. So she had survived the initial attempt on her life, and then she was intentionally hit on the road. This is the life of a turtle. So road mortality studies at Long Point have happened over many years, but Ashley and Robinson's in 1996 found up to 32,000 road kills over 4 years of study along the Long Point Causeway. So it was so bad at times that even at repaving efforts, there would be bones of Blanding's turtles left in the asphalt. So it makes sense. You've got natural areas on both sides and a road cutting through. You're going to get road mortality, especially in such a biodiverse area as a Long Point Causeway. So around 2005, Paul Ashley from Canadian Wildlife Service and myself decided to ask a bunch of people to get together to get some talking going. How can we reduce wildlife mortality? We developed the Long Point Causeway Improvement Project, and if you don't know about it, I suggest everyone Google it because it's very important about the work that was done over many, many years. Road mortality, unfortunately, doesn't end there. It continues on Erie Boulevard, Hastings Drive, even still on the causeway where there's cottages and marinas. So it's an ongoing issue that we need to continue to tackle. Kerry Gunson, Brian Craig, and others are continuing to fight this fight in other areas of the county. So solutions for the many threats facing reptiles are not easy. Development will not end. Subsidized predators adapt easily. Human population continues to grow. Invasive plants multiply. And out of sight, out of mind. Turtles, reptiles in general are often on the back burner when it comes to conservation. So science and conservation, obviously we need to collect long-term data. It's the only way we'll truly understand these species, especially in a dynamic area such as Long Point. We have detailed surveys and research programs that have been initiated at multiple habitats. We do habitat creation efforts, and we do as much research and monitoring as we can to fully understand these creatures. From snake hibernacula to removing Phragmites to all the things that we can do to do habitat creation and rehabilitation that needs to be on the agenda. Education programs are very important. We need to reach the younger generation. They are the ones that are going to replace us in the future and understand the need for this. We need to use the media in as best way as we can. They don't always go our way, but when it does, it can lead to a lot of positive stories and really influence the community. And of course, your supporters, staff, and volunteers, we're nothing without them. I'm nothing without them. The work I do is nothing without them. It's that passion, it's that new generation coming in to take the roles that we've been playing for a lot of years. So I'm going to give you just a quick overview of a glimmer of hope. And the turtle nest protection of the spiny softshell turtle efforts give that glimmer of hope. So issues with nest sites and nest site loss include flooding, cattle, horses, ATV use. Again, the list goes on and on and on. We started caging nests, but we found that floodwaters would overtake the nests and drown the young. We found that our cages were bullseyes for poachers. So we started ensuring that all eggs were taken into captivity and incubated in our incubation program. And that artificial incubation program grew and grew over the past 20 years, and we're now creating very real change. So these numbers are very hard to see, but just know that we started with very low rates of success in the wild with caging nests, and now have 89 to 96% hatch success rate, and we had approximately 6,000 young softshell turtles hatch in our lab this year, 12,000 turtles in total. And that does not get limited to just our work on the Thames River. That includes much of our work in Norfolk County and other counties as well. And so these 12,000 young are animals that would be not in the wild. We would have zero hatch success for the soft shells for sure, and for many of the other species that we incubate for. So this is a way to progress forward to slow some of the declines through recruitment. We need to protect the adults and protect the habitat first, but this is another method in our varied options to protect these species. And exciting news for Norfolk County, as you heard this morning, over the past 2-3 years, we've had amazing, changes. So we have a local group through Eco Adventures and the Pond family. Carrie Gunson, Lauren have done such an incredible job at getting a program up and running for the county, so we don't have to ship eggs all the way to London to incubate them. So outcomes after 30 years in Norfolk County. Some of the largest data sets on reptiles at risk in Canada and the USA. Information that is now used throughout the range of many of these species, including conceived status reports, recovery strategies, care protocols, guidance for new programs, etc. We have a better understanding of the needs of long-point reptiles at risk and improved threat mitigation approaches. We've fought for the protection of reptiles at many long-point sites, and there's now changes in how land management occurs. Still a lot of work to do, though. My team remains the first in line of defense for new threats that impact these animals, because we are out there every year. We've led by example, and now community members, other scientists, and lawmakers have the tools necessary to create change for reptiles at risk. And we've trained countless researchers and visiting profs that now use the lessons learned at sites throughout Canada. Our initial nest protection work now has a home in Norfolk County, as mentioned. So what have I gotten out of it? Lyme disease twice. I've had a loaded gun held to my head at the tip of Long Point by drunken bikers. Multiple attempts on my life along the causeway by drunken people who did not agree with causeway changes. Screamed at and thrown up against a wall for those same causeway changes. And certain groups unfairly demonize efforts to protect reptiles. What I've learned is the realization that I despise politics and just want to hang out with reptiles in the marsh. But really, what have I gotten out of it? Every childhood dream I imagined, working with the species that have been part of who I am since I can remember, given a chance to assist in their survival into the future. A true connection to one of the last wilderness areas in southwestern Ontario, walking thousands of kilometers over decades through some of the most important wetlands in North America, knowing the potential of these areas for the long-term viability of wildlife populations. Building strong relationships over decades with other researchers and conservationists in Norfolk County, as well as with staff from government. Making a true difference by staying true to my ethics, using the data to speak for the species, and not being influenced by outside sources, by gaps in funding, or by politics. Long Point has shaped me as a person, is a part of me, an incredibly important part of my life, and a place I'm indebted to. I crave each chance to vanish into the great dunes and wetlands of Long Point, focused solely on the creatures that have held my fascination since I was a child. This is the connection. This is why you care. This is why most of the work I do out here, there's no funding for it. We just do it because it needs to be done. For all the people who are unable to do that, I understand. But I have the flexibility where I can use a few hundred hours of time. I don't have any kids. Long Point's my kid. So, 1981, Oxford County. 1996, Long Point. Me looking a little rougher in 2025. But I will say, in all the years doing this, at 51, I can still outpace my 20-something research assistants. As soon as they catch up to me, I know I've reached my peak, and it's all downhill from there. But I intend to be in Long Point into my 70s, 80s, or 90s if I can. I wish I could share more. I know I'm so over time, and Brian is going to throw a rock at me soon. So thank you.
So Scott, thank you for the great presentation. Pardon, Paula? It's not working? Oh, there we go. Got to hold it in my mouth, right? So we look at the audience today, and it seems to be two demographics here. And one of the demographics is a lot of students from Fanshawe College and from Niagara College and many universities. And Valley Heights, thank you. Scott, what's your recommendation for all these students for the next 30, 40 years?
All right, so my response to this, I've been asked this a lot over the years, has changed over time. So I used to say, so when I was young, I luckily got this summer job initially and did what I loved, but every weekend I had off. Every moment I could spend working with another program, I would be gone. If I was on Pelee Island with Blue Racers, with Ben Korchak in the mid-90s. I was doing stuff with Ron Brooks, with wood turtles all over the place. I was anywhere and everywhere, whenever I wasn't working, to volunteer. And so I always told people, volunteer as much as you can, give up your entire life to volunteer. The reason my opinions changed a little bit, gas prices, rent prices, food prices. You need to pay the bills. You need, unless you've got the stability of a partner that can get you by, or if you've got parents that you can stay with, which I did for a long time, and thank them. But not everyone has that ability. So I will say, get whatever job you have to do to pay the bills, and any chance you get, still try and get out and volunteer. And I will say, a lot of the jobs now are internal postings, so those volunteer opportunities sometimes get you an in. And I always tell people, be positive, be dedicated. Those are the two things I look for. I don't care if you have experience. I don't care if you do some stupid stuff, as long as you're not completely reckless. But if you are dedicated and you show up, I will work my butt off to ensure that you have a job with me whenever I can. That's not always going to be the case. So, and what I found with myself, I did everything backwards. I got a job, then got a wildlife technician diploma, and then part-time I got a degree while I was working. But nowadays, you need to get as much education as you can, as much experience as you can. But if you get into the right field, work is never work. And so those low-paying jobs initially hopefully will develop into something more. I can't guarantee that, but that's how I look at things. Find a way to make yourself indispensable. So I found a niche for myself. Back in the 90s, there wasn't many people doing reptile work. There's quite a few more now. But find a niche for yourself, whether it's slugs, whether it's some little parasite on a bat. Be the only person that knows about that parasite on that bat, and you'll be indispensable.
Sage advice. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks again.
Thanks, man.
Cheers.
Okay. You're sticking around for the afternoon for a little bit?
Yeah, I've got some time. So if anyone has questions in between, look for the turtle guy.
Excellent. Then get back to your dog. Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. So next we have one of my favorite parts of the conference. But before we get there, I'd like to recognize Councillor Van Passen. Can you stand up? I don't think you've missed a conference here in a decade or two, and we appreciate your work with Norfolk County. Now, just to cover my butt here, are there any other councillors that I didn't notice? Thanks for coming, Chris. Appreciate it very much. So one of my favorite parts is the lightning presentations by many students. And someday we're going to have to consider going to concurrent sessions, but I think it's better to just give a 5-minute presentation when we have to the plenary. So first up, we're going to have Kaylee McAllister. Kaylee is a graduate student at the University of Waterloo, working with Dr. Leah Jones-Crank in something that is extremely important, to value ecosystem services. You're going to head up there? Great. And she also works with the Pembina Institute to advance healthy, affordable, and low-carbon buildings across Canada.
Hi, everyone. Hi. If you were here last year, you may remember I started my talk by saying, I'm afraid of public speaking. If anyone remembers that and is wondering about an update, nothing has changed. So bear with me. I see my supervisor at the back being like, oh, Kaylee. Okay, anyways, my name is Kaylee McAllister. As shared, I work with Dr. Leah Jones-Crank at the University of Waterloo to value ecosystem services in and around Long Point Biosphere region. So today I'm going to split my very brief presentation into 3 even more brief sections. First, I'm going to talk about ecosystem services and why we value them. Second, I'm very briefly going to discuss my methods and our results. And then I'm going to conclude with 2 closing thoughts that can be your main takeaways, because I know you guys are getting a lot of information today. So as for what ecosystem services are most people in the room familiar? Show of hands, ecosystem services. Okay, we all mostly know then that ecosystem services are the benefits that humans derive from ecosystems. Valuing them is important because right now ecosystems and nature are underrepresented in conventional economic decision making because they're something we call a public good. When we value ecosystem services, it allows us to internalize them and better represent them for better policy outcomes. When we value ecosystem services, we're specifically valuing a certain service. So as you can see here, we value like phosphorus retention or stormwater retention. We aren't valuing the entire ecosystem because we all know here that that's not possible. As they say, there's no economy on a dead planet, so we're valuing specifically only the service. So Leah and I looked at ecosystem services at 3 scales across the larger area of cooperation. So we looked at the Long Point region watershed, we looked at Port Dover, and we also looked at the biosphere core. In the watershed, we looked at phosphorus retention services, so the ability of the landscape to uptake runoff and prevent it from entering aquatic ecosystems or Lake Erie. We used replacement cost to value phosphorus retention services, and if anyone's interested in learning more, I'd love to get into it in greater detail, but generally, replacement cost is, you say, if this ecosystem didn't exist and humans had to build infrastructure or do this work themselves, that's how much it would cost, and we're going to assign that value to the ecosystem. So we used replacement cost to value phosphorus retention services, and we found across the entire watershed, every year about $2.7 of phosphorus retention services were provided according to our model. We used the same method to value stormwater retention services in Port Dover, and we found that there were about $2.6 million of stormwater retention services offered by natural assets within Port Dover on an annual basis again. And then to look at the biosphere core in particular, we use a method called benefit transfer. So instead of doing the ecosystem services modeling yourself, you can use the values developed at another site and bring them to your site of interest. So there was a valuation that was conducted for Canada's national parks, and we were able to pull those values over to 2 different types of ecosystems in the biosphere core, and we found that the combined services, so that's a bundle of probably like 14 to 16 ecosystem services that were very diverse, so ranging from like carbon sequestration to habitat preservation, were between $8 million and $84 million a year. I recognize that that is a very broad range, and that is one of the kind of drawbacks conventionally associated with the benefit transfer method. So those are our results. In terms of the key takeaways, because I know that this is economics, which maybe isn't an area of interest or a background for all of you, I thought that it would be helpful to kind of give you 2 little messages that you can keep in your head that aren't all of this technical jargon. Number 1, This study and this research proved that ecosystems provide considerable economic value to local, regional, and global beneficiaries within the biosphere core and the area of operation. So locally, it benefits the community. Regionally, ecosystem services benefit people across the Great Lakes region. And globally, carbon sequestration and habitat connectivity generally contribute to planetary boundaries and things like that, which benefit everybody. The second very important, or the second key takeaway for you guys is regarding this method and the valuing of ecosystem services. Valuing ecosystem services can be done, and it's very important because if ecosystems are not on the balance sheet, they are not considered in conventional economic decision making. Around the world, but there are a lot of different languages, people speak different languages. There is one language that every single person in this world understands, and that is money. Everyone understands a dollar sign, and in our economic paradigm, that is how we assign value to things. So when we conducting these exercises, it is very important to make a business case for conservation and improve management of our common goods. Thank you.
Next, we have Sean Coggins, a second-year master's student at the University of Waterloo, currently working on a community-based research project that is focused on coastal resilience in partnership in the Long Point Biosphere region and the North Shore Resilience Action Plan. And I had the great opportunity of being interviewed by you a couple of weeks ago. Thank you, Sean. I'll give you a 5 minutes, I'll give you a 1 minute notice. Okay?
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. Oh, is this okay? Is it good? Thanks for having me today. My name is Sean, and I'm being co-supervised by Dr. Trant and Dr. Armitage on a research project that's in partnership with the Long Point Biosphere region in support of their North Shore Resilience Action Plan, like Brian mentioned. So this project is focused on addressing coastal erosion challenges that are compromising coastal resilience along the North Shore. And so like Sarah discussed earlier, the North Shore of Lake Erie is one of the coastlines in the Great Lakes that is experiencing significant erosion. This is a process that is likely driven by several factors, including more extreme storms and reduced ice cover in the winter due to climate change. So for this project, I'm aiming to include diverse local perspectives to co-create a set of coastal resilience indicators that reflect communities' values, concerns, and priorities to support coastal resilience initiatives under the North Shore Resilience Action Plan. So co-developed indicators are more likely to reflect key concerns and priorities of local communities and organizations because they reflect lived experiences and support efforts to bring different ways of knowing together. So to do this, I'm conducting semi-structured interviews with key partners who are working with Long Point and the North Shore Resilience Action Plan. In addition, I'm inviting community members to participate in photo voice narrative interviews, as well as a focus group workshop to share their key concerns and priorities on these issues. Photo voice is a participatory research method where participants can take photos to share their perspectives and experiences. So I'm currently in the data collection phase of this project, and there are already lots of interesting insights, which is really exciting. There is still an opportunity to get involved with this research, and I'm actually looking to have a few more participants join the photo voice phase of this project. So this would involve participating in a narrative interview to discuss what is represented in your photographs, as well as participating in the focus group workshop with fellow participants. So this will likely take place in the spring, and it'll be a really nice opportunity to connect with other community members and people living in different areas along the littoral cell. Also, lunch will be provided, so it should be a nice afternoon. So if you are interested in sharing your thoughts and participating, you can scan the QR code and share your email, and I will follow up with more details. And also just want to give a special thank you to Sarah Ammons for all of her support and guidance in this research. I also want to thank OceanWise for supporting a lot of the community engagement activities for this project. So thank you so much. I'll be around today if anyone would like to chat. Yeah, thank you so much.
And next, we will have Emily Rowason, is Master's of Environmental Studies candidate in Social and Ecological Sustainability at the University of Waterloo. And her research focuses on the water-energy-food nexus, particularly the interactions and collaborations among governance actors within and across these systems.
Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Emily Rorison. And yeah, my research is with Dr. Leah Jones-Crank, and we're looking at community and governance actor perspectives on energy, food, and water and environment nexus governance in the Long Point Biosphere region and the greater area of cooperation being Norfolk County. So just a bit more about what the water, energy, food, environment nexus is. It's a concept to consider the interconnections and interdependencies amongst these systems and think about how they interact with one another and influence each other. So as part of my research, I'm conducting semi-structured interviews with governance actors, such as like conservation authorities, people who work for the county, farming organizations as well, and non-governmental organizations in the environmental space. And the interview questions are actually guided by a polycentric governance framework, which is more of a top-down and bottom-up approach where it's kind of more community-based. So we're looking at collaboration amongst these actors as well. And then for the community perspective part of the research, I'm conducting a photo voice survey where I ask residents of Norfolk County to submit between 1 and 3 photos of what they think are challenges to water, energy, or food, and then just a short caption to describe them. And I am still, like Sean, looking for participants for that, so if anyone lives in Norfolk County and would like to participate, it would probably take about 10 minutes to upload your pictures for the survey, and then I will look at them and compare the challenges identified by community members to the challenges that are identified by any of the governance actors. So I'm still in the data collection phase as well, but some preliminary findings. Everyone has identified that there are significant connections between water, food, and the environment within this area, because as we know, it's very agriculturally significant, very biodiverse crops that are grown. There has been limited talk of the energy connections at this point, but we'll see if that changes in the future. And then there has been lots of talk of the collaboration amongst these governance actors, with common successes being their shared goal and the rapport building that they all do with one another, and some limiting factors to collaboration, of course, being time, funding, and capacity within each organization. So as one interviewee mentioned, it's not so much the connection, it's the disconnect that's the problem. So all of these systems are connected, it's just how the governance systems are set up to interact with one another and to address the challenges that is currently still being worked on. And I look forward to sharing my findings for this project when I am finished. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Emily. And I forgot to read the next 2 lines in the next page, that you're also a junior policy analysis with the Canadian Wildlife Service and Environment Canada. Keep at that. You can make a difference there. This, I was reading your poster, quite interesting. Bumblebees. Cool. So I'll read this. You can go put your PowerPoint up. This next presentation was developed by Carolina Doe, Emily Clunas, and Sam Guerin, 3 current ecosystem restoration graduate certificate students at Niagara College. Carolina completed landscape architecture at the University of Guelph. Emily graduated from graphic communications management at Toronto Metropolitan, while Sam holds a Master's of Environmental Science, also from the University of Guelph. And Niagara College Martin Smith and Andrea Sinclair, good to see you again, Andrea, developed this project via funding from CEWIL Canada. Looking forward to your presentation.
Okay, so hi everyone. I'm here to talk a little bit about our bee project that we just started at Niagara College, specifically how we've been quantifying bumblebee activity autonomously using the AgriSound system. AgriSound, if you haven't heard of it, is a company from the UK, and they've sent us 9 devices, and each device uses 1, a solar panel, and 2nd, a sensor that actually senses the acoustic noises that bumblebees make. And so their wing beats are unique from honeybees or hummingbirds and any other pollinators, so we're able to track over time the bee activity that's been going on at each site. So we were able to partner up with multiple Long Point communities, namely Long Point Eco Adventures, the Long Point Basin Land Trust, as well as the St. Williams Conservation Reserve. So we've been able to monitor bee activity at different plant communities. So the first one at Long Point Eco Adventures was the tallgrass prairie, which obviously was made up of mostly grasses. And then also Stepping Stone, which is a sandy plantation site. And what's unique about this site is it's about 60% open sand, which is actually ideal for a bumblebee nest, as they like to bury themselves in the sand and create their hive in there. And lastly, we had a meadow at the Fisher's Creek, which was mostly forbs, and we thought that maybe this would be maybe our highest activity because of all the flowering plants. The sensor itself is able to record from 4 a.m. to 10 p.m., so throughout daylight. And it also senses temperature and humidity as well as luminosity. So taking a look at our results, our first chart at the bottom left, that has the darker lines is the average bee activity at every site. So you can kind of see the different colors. Maybe it won't show as well, so we have a poster that you can come take a look at after. It's usually ranges between about 0 peaking at possibly 30% throughout the day. Whereas if you take a closer look, actually, some of the sites such as Long Point, you'll find that it'll have maybe the highest average activity for the day, but a different site like Stepping Stone will actually have the highest maximum. So I wanted to use this graph just because it mainly shows that though they may not have the highest average throughout the day, that they actually have different fluctuations throughout the time. So maybe throughout 4 hours it has the highest activity, but it goes down to 0 for the rest of the day. The next graph shows the average bee activity and environmental conditions across all monitoring sites, so averaging all bee activity throughout Long Point at our 3 different sites and seeing how it compares to temperature and luminosity. So the luminosity, it would be the dashed red line, and that kind of spikes up and down. We had a lot of rainy and cloudy weather. We were expecting a decrease in bee activity as it gets colder, and some of the things we've noted that there might actually be a delayed effect on bee activity with luminosity. So where you see that luminosity may drop, we see that the bee activity won't drop maybe until the next day, and same thing with the increase. So seeing how temperature and luminosity can affect the different bee activities at all various sites, we think these would all be very useful for the future applications of quantifying bee activity, possibly to help monitor pollinator biodiversity at various sites, creating baselines and benchmarks that we can record and support for restoration-related projects, also providing pollinator habitat benchmarks and highlighting problem areas. So for example, through pesticide use, habitat fragmentation, and invasive species. We're also able to examine relationships between crop yield production and differentiate other insects and pollinators. And I think overall, this kind of helps bridge knowledge gaps to enhance our understanding of holistic ecosystem-based approaches, better aligning agricultural, economic, and environmental goals and practices. Thank you.
Next, we have Laura Denuzio, is a master's student in the Department of Earth Sciences at the University of Toronto, and her research focuses on soil carbon dynamics and organic matter stabilization mechanisms in the Big Creek and Lake Erie watershed.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here and have the opportunity to quickly tell you a little bit about my master's thesis research. So our lab, we're interested in soil carbon accumulation and how that changes over time. So essentially we take really long soil cores. The one that I'm studying is about 2 meters long, and that goes back pretty far into the history of this wetland. What we found in the specific area that I'm researching, which my study site is in Hans Marsh, it's like right on the coast of Lake Erie, still influenced by the Big Creek watershed, but has a lot of influence from Lake Erie as well. And what we found is that this specific area of the wetland is between 1,500 and 2,000 years old. We're not super sure exactly how old it is, but it's in that range. And a lot has happened in those 1,500 to 2,000 years. There's regionally significant carbon stocks in this area to the tune of about 53 kilograms per meter squared. So this makes it a really, really important carbon sink, both for the area and for the future of climate change around the world, really. And there's a lot of different things at play here that allow this marsh to act as such a significant carbon store. And one thing that I'm particularly interested in is the mechanisms for organic matter stabilization. So previously, wetland soil organic matter research has really focused on what we consider the particulate organic matter. So that's essentially just partially degraded plant matter that has been buried in the soil and is being prevented from decomposing further, either due to the inherent sort of stability of the plant matter or because of the anoxic conditions of the marsh that just prevent it from decomposing further. But more recent research has been very focused on what's known as the mineral-associated organic matter. So essentially, portions of the organic matter form chemical associations with the surfaces of silt and clay minerals with reactive iron and aluminum species, and then this prevents them from being degraded even further. And what we've found in this area is that since wetland initiation, these mineral associations are very important for stabilizing carbon, and it's not just the typical particulate organic matter that's contributing here. So since wetland initiation, it changes at depth. We sample our cores at a resolution of about every 2 centimeters, so we have a lot of samples to work with. And it changes a lot, but it's between 5 and 25% of the total organic matter is stored in these mineral associations. And what I find the most exciting is that the organic matter in these mineral associations is significantly more vulnerable to decomposition than the organic matter at a similar depth that is stored in just particulate, is just being preserved by the conditions of the wetland. So these mineral associations are extremely important for stopping carbon degradation and allowing these ecosystems to act as carbon sinks. This is not only important for future climate change planning because changes in the environment can have a really big effect on the ability of the marsh to store carbon, but also for land use change. As far as I can tell in my own research, the specific area of Hans Marsh that I'm looking at has never been drained or used for agriculture. Please correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody has a better knowledge of the history of the area than I do. But despite that, there's still a great deal of variation in the amount of organic matter that's stored through time and the mechanisms of storage through time as well. So a lot of this, I believe, has to do with the changes in land use in the area. So the sediment supply, the changes in just like regional microclimate and things like that can have a really big effect on these ecosystems' ability to act as carbon sinks. If anybody has more questions about it, please come ask me. I'll be in the other room. I love talking about dirt. So please come with any questions that you may have, and I'm happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Josh Rose, who's a second-year master's student at the University of Waterloo, Department of Geography and Environmental Management, and Collaborative Water Programming, working with Dr. Chantel Marco. His current focus is on identifying spatial and temporal predictors, particularly road-adjacent land cover type on reptile and amphibian road mortality in the Long Point Biosphere region. And I got to see Josh a lot this past summer because one of his sites was just down the road from where I lived. Rain or shine, he's out there collecting good data. Looking forward to your presentation.
Well, yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joshua Rose. I'm a second-year Master of Science student at the University of Waterloo, working in the Wildlife Ecohydrology and Conservation Lab and the Collaborative Water Program. Now, as you probably have heard throughout the day, road mortality is a big issue for all wildlife, but it is a massive, massive issue for our herpetofauna species, which includes our reptiles and our amphibians. In both provincial and federal species recovery documents, road networks are listed as one of the primary threats to SAR species, and it contributes to habitat fragmentation, and this results in a higher percentage of time that these species are spending on the road. Now, herpetofauna are especially prone to vehicle-wildlife collisions because they make a number of overland movements, are relatively small and slow-moving, and utilize a variety of habitats throughout the year, one of which are roadways and the unique features that they provide. Now, as an example, snapping turtles are often found selecting for roadside nesting habitats just due to the open, maintained, and soft road shoulder, and it becomes an attractive spot to lay eggs. Now, previous research has focused on the drivers of vehicle-wildlife collisions at more of a local scale, so one or a few long road transects, but our research instead aims to understand the predictors of herpetofauna road mortality at the larger landscape scale within the Long Point Biosphere region, an area, of course, of high biodiversity, but also an area where Norfolk County manages and maintains over 2,000 kilometers of roadways in light of that. So we want to know whether reptile and amphibian road mortality rates are differing across land cover type between road transects, and if so, are there any spatial or temporal trends in peak road mortality rates? So to answer this, between 2024 and 2025, we completed 1,932 systematic walking surveys across 15 road transects between April and October for 2 years. So each transect was 300 meters long and characterized by dominant adjacent land cover type, those being agriculture, forest, and wetland. Now transects were surveyed on average between 3 and 5 times per week, with the exception of July and August, where surveys were not able to be completed as frequently. And so to save you some math, this is about 579 kilometers of roads that were surveyed and included in this study. And then to help address some detection bias in 2025, we also monitored the persistence of road-killed carcasses on the road until complete removal. And then we also recorded vehicle counts to kind of understand how vehicles are influencing road mortality rates across each different transect. So across our 2 study years, in total, we observed 1,449 mortalities on the road. And this is across 20 different species, some of which include eastern fox snake, eastern hognose snake, Blanding's turtle, snapping turtle, and 1 blue-spotted salamander. So these results in an average density of approximately 0.4 carcasses per kilometer for our reptiles, and just over 2 carcasses each kilometer for our amphibians. The probability of encountering a turtle, snake, or frog was highest at our wetland adjacent sites, whereas salamanders were most often encountered at forest transects, where we observed upwards of 59 individual salamanders during one single survey. So that's 300 meters of road segment. For our reptile species, we had 46% that are federally protected under the Species at Risk Act. Now, mortality also peaked at different times throughout the year between each taxon. We observed a steady mortality rate for snakes throughout the year, seeing a slight uptick in September during warm days, and we also saw a notable peak in June for turtles during nesting season. Salamanders were predominantly found in September during their migration to overwintering habitat in the forests, whereas frogs, we didn't see an immediate trend in terms of temporal. So, and interestingly, we also observed a mass mortality event for our red-spotted newts, so the little guy on the right-hand side, the red guy, on this exact same day for both study years. So this is September 25th, we observed a mass mortality event as they were traveling to their overwintering habitat. And then lastly, throughout the season, we also observed and flagged a total of 111 road-killed individuals, and as I was mentioning, to measure persistence. And of these 111, 91 were included in our calculation of average persistence. Now, only individuals deemed to have been recently struck at the time of detection were included to control for body condition. Persistence of carcasses varied for each taxon, led by salamanders at approximately 12.6 days, followed by frogs at 2.7 days, snakes at 1.6 days, and turtles at the shortest at just 1.4 days persisting on the roadway. Now, while we're not able to say for certain how these individuals are removed, be it scavengers, repeated deterioration from traffic volume, or even someone just seeing a struck turtle on the road and moving it off, this kind of gives us an understanding of the level of effort required to determine accurate counts for road mortality. And this is especially important for rare or species at risk, as well as those infrequent mass mortality events that I was talking about earlier. So 32% of individuals were fully removed off the road in less than a day. Just over half were removed within 2 days, and 3/4 were removed within 3 days. And just really quickly before I wrap up, I want to give a big thank you to the Biosphere region for support throughout this whole field season. Brian, Carrie, Lauren, the entire WEC lab for making this magnitude of surveys possible, as well as Lauren Rago for putting up with me this entire summer. And I know I glossed over a lot of information, so I'm happy to chat some more at the posters afterwards. Thank you.
There are 2 other posters. Tegan Netton with Ontario Nature, and her colleagues have a poster in the back, prescribed burns and snake habitat use. And there she is. Tegan, I have the great pleasure, Tegan's my supervisor we have cover board monitoring programs for snakes. Man, is she ever tough. You gotta be 5 meters apart. You gotta make sure you're the temperature correctly. And Tegan, I think maybe in the future, any other people in the room work with Tegan for monitoring snakes? Wow. I think we'll have to have a paper on what you're learning, Tegan. So thank you for coming to present a poster. And then Serena, where's Serena here? Right to my heart. I love American chestnut trees. And one of my students from Fanshawe, Aiden, are you around, Aiden? There he is. Have you already talked to Serena? Well, you should do that, because he loves chestnut trees too. So before closing this segment, and we'll have a bit of a break, the students, great presentations, but I'm sure they all appreciate the professors they're working with. Now, if I missed anybody, stand up anyway. So if you're a professor or a high school teacher or a college teacher, I would like you to stand up, including Dr. Sarah, Dr. Leah, Dr. Chantel, Dr. Andrew, Dr. Derek, Dr. Andrea. If you could all stand up, because we know you work it out. Come on, don't be shy. Please stand up. And thank you for your mentorship. And I know the students appreciate it. And now it's time for a little break. Thank you.
All right, everyone. We've made it to session 4, our final session of the conference. Thank you all for sticking through and staying with us till the end of the day. And without further ado, let's get right into it. And it's my pleasure to introduce Ryan Wolf. I've had the pleasure of working with Ryan for the past 4 years, and he is a very accomplished both aquatic and terrestrial biologist specializing in reptiles and amphibians. And today he'll be talking to us about gray rat snakes, old habits die hard, and a conservation action plan that is in progress as we speak. So without further ado, here's Ryan.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Gabe has to say those nice things because he's worked for me. But no, I'm very happy to be back again this year to talk about snakes. As Gabe said, this time I'm going to be talking to you guys about gray rat snakes. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about a collaborative effort that's been going on to create a conservation action plan for the species in the Carolinian zone. So I'm going to try and read off these names because I've got an acronym that might even put the OECM one to shame. But so the collaborative partners on this are African Lion Safari, Wildlife Preservation Canada, and hold on for this one, the International Union for Conservation of Nature Species Survival Commission Canadian Conservation Planning Specialist Group Canada. Just that for a mouthful. So I'm going to reference them as CPSG from here on out. So now, what I didn't think about is that some of you might not know what a gray rat snake even is. So before I start, I'm going to just talk a little bit about the species themselves. So it is Ontario's largest snake, and it's Canada's longest snake. They can often reach lengths of over 6 feet long. And when they're old, mature individuals, they are basically a uniform jet black and are shiny. But neonates, when they first hatch out of the eggs, they look like hatchling fox snakes. They have like a very light gray, almost white background with saddle patterns on them. And then, as you can see in that picture there, that is a juvenile stage. They kind of transition and get darker, but still have the patterning. So just if you ever come across one, that's what you're looking out for. They are a semi-arboreal species. They spend a lot of time up in the trees. Fox snakes will go up to the trees to raid nests and things like that, but these guys actually spend time up basking and utilizing those trees much more heavily. And they are heavily reliant on predominantly deciduous forests, and specifically the edges of those forests. So in Ontario, for this species, we have two populations. One is in the eastern part of the province, by Kingston in the Frontenac axis, and they are doing better than they are here, that's for sure. They're only listed as threatened, but here, what we're going to talk about today, in the Carolinian zone, spanning basically the entire way from Niagara, they used to range all the way to Point Pelee. That north shore of Lake Erie is the Carolinian zone population of gray rat snakes. And as it stands right now, there's only a few locations left along that historic range where gray rat snakes still exist. And from the last Kasiwik assessment, as well as our most recent updates, it's assumed that there are less than 250 adult, mature rat snakes in the Carolinian zone today. So, like we've heard a lot from other talks, they also face many of the same threats when it comes to habitat loss, fragmentation, road mortality is a huge one, intentional persecution, like Scott was saying with turtles, snakes probably got even more heavily intentionally persecuted than turtles. There's lots of, I could go on about that for a long time as well, but and another threat that faces them is the genetic diversity that's been lost due to the restrictions in their range. So you can see on the map there, just kind of where approximate locations are the black dots where they still are today. So having an understanding of, and we've had this understanding for a little while, that this species is not doing well in the Carolinian zone. So the question comes up, why now? Why do we want to create this conservation action plan for the species now? We know there's the severe population fragmentation, and I apologize, the graph's a little small, but what we've done with some of the data that we've collected, and we've collected this data from NHIC, a little bit from iNaturalist, landowners, Miriam Garchor and Peter Carson provided a lot. And what we can see looking at that data is that the general trend of observations of gray rat snake have gone down and continue to go down immensely over the last 40 years or so. And so this graph just kind of highlights that, but it's also not a true representation of the decline. The decline is likely much more than this. As time has gone on, more and more people report sightings to things like iNaturalist and NHIC, so we should be getting more reports if the population stayed the same. But so this is just a very clear indicator that we are on a decline, and it's at an alarming rate. And another reason why we're acting now is we've put a lot of effort into gray rat snakes in recent years. Especially the last 4 years, we've had a lot of intense landowner outreach efforts and volunteer survey efforts that have gone in to actually trying to find the species, and we've been able to find a few extant populations where they still are, which were completely unknown before. We knew they were around, but we didn't know where any actually were. So now that we have an idea, we've identified a decline, and we can actually find some snakes. It's a promising sign, but even those sites where we found them to still be, they are very much so at an imminent risk of collapse, and the number of snakes at these locations are very, very low. So it's a matter of time before they blink out, and we want to seize the opportunity now, the window of opportunity that we have to act before those local extirpations occur. So to do this, we have the conservation action plan that we're developing, and the planning process, it's being led by NRSI, Natural Resource Solutions, Inc. That's the company that I work for, but with those project partners I mentioned, including that enormously long acronym. But it's also it's become more designed and facilitated by CPSG Canada. They've had experience with this with many other species, and so they're kind of leading the way in pulling everyone together to have this action plan developed. And so it's going to be building, and it says nearly 10 years, but I'm realizing it's actually over 10 years of research and efforts on gray rat snake, including we've done radiotelemetry studies, habitat suitability modeling, and those landowner outreach and targeted surveys that I mentioned. And so the point of this is we're trying to bring together ecologists, geneticists, community stakeholders, and combine that rigorous science that we have come up with and been doing with the local knowledge to develop a strategy that will be both realistic and effective for the recovery of the gray rat snake in the Carolinian zone. Excuse me. So the actual planning pathway, it involves multiple steps. We've been conducting a series of virtual workshops and many technical meetings with experts on the species across its range and the local stakeholders we've been doing things like developing a threat assessment analysis. So COSEWIC, when they do a threat assessment for the entire population, we've taken that a step further and we do a threat assessment for each individual subpopulation and location where we believe or know that they still are. So we've done a threat assessment in that way for them. And we're also, meaning Amy Shabbat from African Lion Safari, has done a population viability analysis for this population of rat snake. And so we can use that population viability analysis. I mean, we know the trend is declining, but we can actually look at that with the threats that we've come up with and say if those threats are changed, if we can mitigate for road mortality, if we can decrease intentional persecution, what will happen to the population in the future? How will the population respond? And that's what the population viability analysis can help guide us towards. And so yeah, the entire purpose of it is to build the consensus on priority actions, some of those being in situ efforts like habitat protection and restoration, road mortality mitigation, and community education and engagement. And this may also include ex situ efforts, which will be considered, including developing like a captive breeding population that gets released and augmented to boost the current existing populations. And so again, the key here will be ensuring that our plan is practical, scientifically informed, and supported by local stakeholders. So why Norfolk County specifically is an important part of this process is that the Big Creek population, which is a term that encompasses the Norfolk population, is a focal area. So and by no means would I say it's a stronghold. There's not a lot of snakes. But in terms of where they are left in the Carolinian zone across a whole stretch of Lake Erie, Norfolk County has likely had some of the highest numbers to begin with, and still likely has some of the highest numbers of these snakes left. But we're talking in the range of around 100 snakes is likely. So it's become a focal area for that reason, but it's also been a focal area in the past for research. So NRSI did a radiotelemetry study on them in 2017 to 2020 where we tracked a handful of individuals and got habitat suitability models completed and got an understanding of how they're using the spaces that they're in. And another reason this is going to be a focal area is you can see on the bottom right, that map. Norfolk has a very large proportion of protected land. And I think this map is even out to date. I'm sure there's many more properties. But these are locations where we can actually start to address some of those threats, some of those in situ threats, and hopefully make an impact on this species in Norfolk County, whereas a lot of the other locations are all on private land, and it's much more difficult to actually be able to initiate some of those actions to reduce the threats to them. So Norfolk County is a pretty important place for the rat snakes. So the next steps, we have our last workshop. It's actually next week. So we're going to wrap that up and then probably have some follow-up technical meetings to actually develop that conservation action plan for the Carolinian population of gray rat snake. And then we're going to apply for funding to do some of the in situ work and possibly ex situ work, whatever the conservation action plans recommend, to actually start trying to recover this population. And we are hoping that that conservation action plan will provide those actions for others to also apply for funding or participate in the recovery of the species. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for your attention and open to questions and any interest in collaboration with that type of work. We can do 2 questions. Yes. The question was, what's the status of the species in the United States? And they are abundant. They are a common species. They're not at risk in, maybe one state. I don't even know if they're at risk at any states. So they're across the border. They're pretty common, but we've done a good deal of damage to our environment and population of southern Ontario as a whole. So they're endangered here. Well, we've had a large-scale destruction and loss of forests is our main impact here. And so the rat snakes, they would have expanded all the way across the northern shore of Lake Erie, across the forests and woodlots that were there. But now they're really restricted to those remnant patches, and oftentimes it's ravine systems and creek corridors and things like that that still hold the forest. Yeah. Thanks. Lauren? Yeah, so that is a question that will be discussed in the next workshop. We've had preliminary discussions about it. We don't even know if ex situ is going to be a route that we go. But if it were to be, there's some legal logistics that come with that. So, like even Frontenac, where we have more of these snakes, legally they are a different species, considered a different species. So you can't actually take from there and bring them down here. And so we have to do an analysis genetic-wise to see if the state's ones are compatible. Because in Ohio, there's much more abundant population, so that would be a possibility potentially. But a key component of this is that because we have found extant populations here, we know there are some left, but very few. If we are able to, if it comes to it that we do need to do ex situ, that's the action plan forward, then we have the ability to actually find snakes and bring in snakes to create that breeding population from the local area. And that being said, I just want to caveat that with usually when those things happen, you don't actually take wild snakes and keep them. You would have like a clutch of eggs. So you'd find a gravity female and you'd keep a few of the eggs, or have a male and female you find in the spring and they mate, that kind of thing. It wouldn't be like, we wouldn't want to actually take any individuals from our very small populations and remove them. We're just, establishing a thing to hopefully one day bolster them so they stick around. Good? Okay, thanks everyone.
Okie dokie. And now we are down to our final speaker of the day, and then we will have some final remarks after that. So I'd like to invite Samantha Summer to the stage. Sam has been with NCC for just over 4 years and is one of the managers of the Habitat Restoration Team. She oversees the coastal marsh Phragmites management in Norfolk County and in areas such as the Big Creek National Wildlife Area, the Long Point National Wildlife Area, Turkey Point Provincial Park, and more. She also oversees the Invasive Species Stewardship Team, a stewardship team focused on managing invasive species of all types throughout the year in the county. So give it up for Sam.
Hello, everybody. I think that's good, yeah. Microphone's perfect. Okay, so I'm here today to give an update on the priority place that, like the NCC, the work that we've been doing in the priority place since 2020. So first, I'm going to talk about the invasive species control that's been happening with our Southwest Ontario team. So to break it down, we have 3 different teams in our office, and I'll be kind of going over each of the 3 of them today. So I'll start with the Southwestern Ontario Invasive Species Control. So NCC, who are we? The Nature Conservancy of Canada is the country's largest environment charity, working to deliver large-scale permanent conservation. Managing invasive species is a cornerstone of our habitat restoration work, and my role is Habitat Restoration Manager. I focus on the restoration of the coastal wetlands of Lake Erie via Phragmites management. That's me in the bottom left there, in a patch of Phragmites in Long Point this year. So to start off, this was our Southwest Ontario team's garlic mustard control efforts. This was under the forests and treed swamps target. From 2020 to 2025, approximately 840 hectares of garlic mustard have been controlled. It was a combination of both NCC staff as well as Giles Restoration Services, a contractor that we often work with. It was conducted both chemically via herbicide as well as manually via garlic mustard pulls. The focus was on areas of disturbance with increased light. So for example, restored field edges that can become large seed sources in sensitive areas with sensitive species. So in the back of the RTV there, you can see that there's a QR 400. That means that it's just a large tank in which we can store herbicide. That's only used for landscape scale management. For anything more sensitive or smaller, we have backpack sprayers, and for extra sensitive areas, say there's species at risk nearby, we can do mechanical management there. Okay, moving on to their woody deciduous control. This was under the open country target. From 2020 to the present, approximately 1,450 hectares of woody invasive species have been controlled. This includes multiflora rose as well as autumn olive. This was a focus on recently restored areas because they're prone to invasion by non-native species. Invasive species really do like a disturbed habitat, so anything that's new, you're likely to get invasives. So for some background, autumn olive and multiflora rose were both planted as wildlife habitat in the 1970s by the MNR. This was because autumn olive especially fixes nitrogen, and it was promoted as a way to improve and stabilize the soil. However, natural prairie habitats are often low in nutrients, so autumn olive changed the soil composition, and it allows non-specialist species to outcompete specialist prairie species that are already adapted to those low nutrient conditions. This is thistle control. So from 2020 to 2025, approximately 65 hectares of invasive thistle species have been controlled. This was mainly creeping thistle and bull thistle. So the areas focused on included restored meadows and wetland berms. This was mainly done by NCC staff. Okay, this brings us to pine control. So from 2020 to the present, approximately 530 hectares of invasive pine species have been controlled in restored meadows. 41 hectares of these were plantations that were specifically removed, like the trees were good enough for timber. The other 530 hectares was specifically within restored fields. So this was a combination of approaches. The goal being to maintain open habitat and restore dense plantations to more natural tree density and species diversity to allow light to reach the ground and to support the ground shrub layer. The mature plantations, as I mentioned, were managed by the contractors, and that was through commercial harvest permits, so where the timber was marketable. Whereas the younger plantations, that 530 hectares, it was a combination of the paid contractors, NCC staff thinning, and a couple of different approaches. So there were some drill and fill approaches to isolated mature trees. Drill and fill being a method of applying herbicide where you drill into the tree and you apply the herbicide, and that kind of saves you herbicide and is an effective method. And a Mary mulcher is the tool that's in the bottom there. So that was used in some situations for larger, denser trees that were otherwise in open habitat, and it was, again, to just help open up the areas. Okay, and this is our prescribed burn slide. So prescribed burns are important to maintain prairie. From 2020 to the present, approximately 120 hectares of restored meadow and tall grass prairie have been burned. That was over a total of 6 prescribed burns that ranged between 6 to 40 hectares. The goal here was to maintain prairie species and diversity, to remove young pines from restored prairie, as well as to focus on areas in the butterfly block to maintain habitat for mottled dusky wing. So the burn on the left was actually a burn done on a Phragmites patch that had already been treated with herbicide, and then it was rolled, and then it was burned. If you treat it while it's still standing, it can either, if it's dense, become way too large of a fire and kind of become out of control, or if it's too sparse, it just won't take. So it is important to roll it first in order for a burn to be effective. Okay, so that brings me to Phragmites management in the Long Point region. So this is just an overview of what kind of has been happening from 2015 to 2025. So our project purpose. The project began in 2015 as a way to preserve, protect, and contribute to the recovery of Canada's wetlands, wildlife, and species at risk in the Long Point region. Long Point was chosen as a project area due to the hydrological connections, the global, the national, and provincial designations, the amount of habitat for a high number of wetland-dependent wildlife, including around 23 species at risk. It's an internationally recognized migratory bird stopover location. There's a high number of rare species, and overall, just a good opportunity to make a landscape-scale impact. So to do this, we implement non-native Phragmites management, and we monitor and evaluate the impacts of those actions. So this is our Phragmites management approach. So first of all, we always stick to and abide by the OIPC best management practices that just detail mitigation measures for things like herbicide and things like heavy equipment. So we always use the Ontario Clean Equipment Protocol, which is to say that every time you leave a marsh, you have to ensure that your equipment is clean and you're not going to be spreading the seeds or invasive species. So essentially, it's making sure you're cleaning it, you're scrubbing it, and there's absolutely no chunks of dirt left over on your equipment before it moves out of the site that you've been in. In addition to this, we do species at risk sweeps periodically throughout the day, as well as in the morning. And our equipment is low impact overall. So you can see in the bottom right picture, we have our Marshmasters there. They're a vehicle that's actually on a track, as well as on pontoons. So they're actually a lot less heavy than they look, and they do, because they're on a track and have a large surface area, it's a very low PSI. As well as the fact that we drive very slowly, under 5 kilometers an hour at all times, to ensure that, first of all, we're getting a good spray coverage, and second of all, that we're minimizing damage. Third of all, it gives species a chance to get out of the way or make themselves known before we, so we can see them before we get to them. So some of the equipment that we need, PPE, obviously. Marshmasters, in the top left, that's a fat truck. The cool thing about that vehicle is looks like a pretty large ATV, and that's essentially what it is, but the cool part about it is that you can decide how inflated the tires are, either manually or you can change it automatically. So if you're on a trail versus if you're in snow, those would be different like inflation levels there. So we also use a boat, we use an ATV, we'll use side-by-sides to carry crew and our equipment around. We have our backpack sprayers. We have kind of everything we need, all the tools for repair, and we always make sure we bring those with us in the field. For our electronics, we have a cool setup called an STA logger, and that automatically tracks all of our spray data. So essentially what you do is those QR400s that I mentioned before, they have a sprayer on the very end of a very long reel. So 400 feet is how long it can go. With the STA logger attached, every time you compress the sprayer, it uploads to a map automatically so that you can see exactly where you sprayed and exactly where you've been. We have GPS units as well for both backup data, just in case something happens, as well as to mark any species at risk we see or any kind of anomalies. So say we find an anthropogenic feature, we'll use our GPS units. We also have Avenza maps on our tablets for redundancy to ensure, again, that if both of those fail, we always know exactly where we've been and we can review our track lines. We keep in-reach devices on us at all times for safety. We communicate through helmets. The Marshmasters they're not crazy loud, but they are quite loud. So it's good to have the helmets for hearing protection as well as communication. We have a Kestrel with us at all time, that's the bottom left, to ensure that the weather is conducive to spraying. Mentioning the weather too, we have to ensure that we have a good window of time before a rainfall if rain is in the forecast. For example, with glyphosate, you need to have at least an hour, and with Habitat Aqua, you need to have at least 4 hours. So you have to be very careful about the weather. We also have our phones with us to make sure we can contact each other when possible in Long Point. As it was mentioned, there's not much service there. And then everything we need to be able to charge any electronics that die during a 12-hour day. So in the fall, what we do is apply herbicide. We have applied via helicopter before. That was really neat. It was a very targeted application with a huge buffer from any forest, and the helicopter had to stay, I think, 2 meters above the frag at all times. use our Marsh Masters. We use our Fat Tracks boat, backpack, again, combination of equipment. And that's all to get a good spray, make sure we're trying to mitigate the effects of the Phragmites. In the winter, we'll do mechanical management, and this is to reduce the dead standing biomass via rolling, cutting, or burning. So if you leave the biomass up in a particularly dense patch, what happens is it will die, but it will stay standing, so it still has the negative effects, or some of the negative effects that Phragmites has. So it will ensure that nothing else can grow, essentially, and that light's not reaching the ground anyway, so it's making it harder for our native species to come back via the seed bank. In the summer and the spring, we obtain all the necessary permissions and permits to continue management and have all our meetings. And then in the subsequent fall, that's when we do herbicide treatment as needed. So generally, on the next slide here, we find that it's around a 95% efficacy, depending on the site specifics. So this is environmental monitoring section. This is done post-season each year to assess our efficacy of the methods in our application, to survey for species at risk and invasive species, and to determine where efforts would be best focused in the next year. Generally, again, you see a 5 to 10% rate of regrowth, depending on site specifics. So for example, if you're in a particularly thick patch, healthy Phragmites that's never been treated before, it can be less exposed to herbicide, therefore might take it up a little bit less. So those are just things you kind of have to be thinking about. Additionally, each time, native plant communities, open water, and hemi-marsh habitats are returning. We are seeing those come back. There's no observed negative impacts to non-target species, and the species at risk, some are benefiting. So for example, we're seeing bent spike rush returning, Fowler's toads, and barn swallows returning. And lastly, the use of the herbicide has demonstrated to be low risk to the environment and to health. The herbicide and surfactant levels in the water and the sediment in all of our tests have been well below all the ecological thresholds and degrade quickly. The surface water samples have also never approached the Ontario drinking water quality standard. So to continue on environmental monitoring, in the spring, so the first one I mentioned was post-treatment, and then we do one in the spring as well. So this doubles as a reconnaissance as well as a monitoring. It's completed prior to the new season, so we can get a better idea of regrowth. So that's one thing you don't see in the fall is the regrowth. And we'll look for other invasive species, we'll look for species at risk, other items of note. So monitoring is super important there. Another big consideration of ours are timing windows. So they are used to determine the best time to treat Phragmites with herbicide. Both of these figures are from the 2021 OIPC Best Management Practices, updated in 2024, which is the most up-to-date version. So in the top right there, the figure shows when Phragmites is flowering and beginning to senesce. These are the best times to apply herbicide as nutrients are starting to move towards the Phragmites roots to prepare for winter. And this means that there are around 3 months in the year where herbicide is most effective, which is a pretty relatively short biological window. The figure below shows tax activity timing throughout the year. So we try to ensure that the window for spawning is avoided. Any work with heavy equipment, we don't start until mid-August. And for the fish taxa there, we don't enter any fish spawning habitat with heavy equipment. Table 10 as well, not pictured here, but in the best management practices, it details mitigation actions to reduce impact. So such as like the Ontario Clean Equipment Protocol that I mentioned before, doing backpack work where possible, safe and feasible, surveying, and more. So this map was created in 2015. This was a remote sensed map. So it was remote sensing the Phragmites on Long Point. It came out with 1,328 hectares of Phragmites to control. So since then, the NCC and the Long Point Phragmites Action Alliance have implemented a collaborative approach to frag management in the Long Point region to address the significant impacts of Phragmites and protect the region's globally significant biodiversity. The first phase of the project was primarily focused on management of Phragmites in the coastal meadow marshes of Long Point and at Turkey Point. It involved multiple landowners, Ontario's first aerial and ground-based application of aquatic safe herbicides, so that helicopter application. For Phragmites control under an emergency use registration permit from the Canada's Pesticide, or Health Canada's Pesticide Regulatory Agency, which includes a follow-up control on an annual basis. So yeah, with NCC and its partners, it's demonstrated several successful innovative methods for the management of Phragmites in the Long Point marshes. And since then, too, we have many more partners, which I will mention later. So this is the 2024 map. So this was made last year after our efforts. So this shows the Phragmites that are actually on the ground there. So compared to that remote sensing map from earlier. So on this map, we show over 2,100 hectares. So it's a lot more than was initially thought. And this is kind of reflected in the remote sensing, also ground truthing, and the spread over the years a little bit. So this is our winter management activities when I was mentioning rolling and cutting. So rolling is a roller attached to the back of the Marshmaster there. You can see that there's cutters on it. It looks heavy. It's not. It's hollow. But what it does is we put it in, it's called down float. But you have it against the marsh, and it is able to move with, like move up and down as needed, so it can go over logs and stuff. And what happens with that is it not only does it crush down the Phragmites, but it cuts it up a little bit so it has an easier time decomposing back into the soil. And cutting is done in more sensitive sites or smaller sites, and that's just done with a combi cutter with, again, just the goal of getting it all to lay down on the ground. That makes it just easier to see Phragmites regrowth in the following year, ensures wildlife can use the habitat rather than dead standing Phragmites preventing reentry, and the resource competition is less, so light can actually touch the ground here. So for, yeah, as just I said, for large patches, we use that Marshmaster. For the smaller ones, we use the backpack. Winter, you really have to consider safety, making sure if you are cutting by foot, you're not accidentally going onto somewhere you're going to sink really deep. I have done that before by accident, and it's kind of hard to get out. So this brings me to the invasive species stewardship team. So our management efforts in Long Point, having that success, has led to, in 2022, we recognized the need for the management of other species besides Phragmites. So the invasive species stewardship team was created. So their goal is also to contribute to the recovery of the wetlands, wildlife, and species at risk in the Long Point area by implementing non-native flora management, by monitoring and evaluating the impacts of those actions, and also engaging in other restoration related activities. So they're entirely dedicated to field work. Like anytime the weather is conducive, they're managing invasive species either chemically or mechanically. The goal of the team, again, similar to the Phragmites management, but it implements other non-native flora management. They also assess the impacts of those actions. They adjust as required. And other restoration activities they've done involve restoring like beaver ponds and then helping other teams with their efforts as well in other subregions. This is an example of their mapping project. So you can see this is only their 2022 data. So hard at work. The highlighted point at the very bottom near the at the bottom middle of the screenshot, that's the point I have to show the dialog box there. So this is field maps. You can turn off and on layers as needed. You can put in information for other teams. So in this one, I think someone was just marking that there was an invasive species there and that it would need to be managed at some point. For project progress. From April 2022 to March 2025, the existing program has treated 1,326.57 hectares of invasive species, resulting in over 4,000 hectares of improved habitat within Norfolk County. So through this work, strong partnerships have been built and fostered with 8 agencies that own and or steward land in Norfolk to support their conservation goals through staff time and on-the-ground stewardship. Significant investment has been made into the staff training and capacity building, supporting long-term program success. So for example, to date, staff certifications include 6 integrated pest management licenses, 4 prescribed burn RX 100 courses, 11 ATV workplace safety training, and more. The program has also supported career development within the organization, so we've had a few people move up within NCC due to the team, and that just reflects the program's ability to foster internal growth, build leadership, and support conservation career pathways. And yeah, so you can see that 48 invasive species have been targeted and 7 habitat types have been impacted. Again, the treated and improved hectares, very impressive, over 4,000 improved, and that is really cool to see. Okay, so I wanted to end with thank you so much to all of our donors, partners, and supporters. Thank you everyone for listening, for coming today. This was a team effort, and it wouldn't have happened without all of our donor supporters and partners. So for example, the OMNRF, ECCC, Ducks Unlimited, Long Point Basin Land Trust, Long Point Region Conservation Authority, Bird Studies Canada, the Biosphere, the MECP, the Long Point Ratepayers Association, private groups, and more. So thank you so much for your support, and that's all.
Thank you very much for all of the presentations. Thank you for the students who did the poster presentations and the rapid fire presentation. I hope I haven't missed anyone that Tom hasn't already thanked. So just in conclusion, I'd just like to say, can you hear? Okay. This is our 13th annual research conference, which is really amazing. And I think it's the biggest attendance we've had so far. So obviously it's something that people enjoy in the conservation community and want to continue. You also have heard from our contractors this morning about our other projects at the Biosphere. Why am I telling you all this? Just to say, if you support the work that the Biosphere is doing, there are ways for you to be involved. I think everyone knows that's in the nonprofit world, whether it be conservation or anywhere else, and even in the academic world, that funding is always a challenge. And some of our major projects are coming to a sunset in the end of March 31st, Priority Place and OECM. That funding, the current funding will lapse, and we are not yet sure if it will be replaced or at what level. So if you support the Biosphere, there are ways for you to help us to keep doing the good work that we're doing. One is to volunteer. We have opportunities, certainly with the Wildlife Road Watch, but there are all kinds of other projects. I know when Sarah's planting the sand dunes that we're always looking for strong backs, and digging in the sand is not as bad as digging in hard soil, I can tell you from experience. So there are opportunities for stewardship activities, and we are always looking for volunteers. We're certainly always looking for donors. We're going to launch one of our first online donation campaigns for Giving Tuesday to support the turtle hatchery. So we're hoping that we'll get a wide response to that. Everybody seems to love the turtles. I haven't met anyone who doesn't. So look for that. But you can also donate large amounts if you have the inclination and the resources. And then finally, you could become a member of the Biosphere. It's only $35, unless you want to become a lifetime member, in which case it's $500, and then we stop nattering at you every year. But you can join for $35, which gives you an inside track, as Tom said, inside baseball on our events, some discounts on our events with fees, access to our beautiful merchandise. I don't know if people saw our lovely turtle t-shirts. I think we sold about 10 of them at least. So those are all sort of membership benefits. But most of all, the cumulative impact of those three things, volunteering, donating, becoming a member, means that the Biosphere will continue to thrive, which is extremely important. So on your way out, if you haven't already picked it up and you're part of an organization or you have friends, I've put our new brochure on the registration table. Take as many as you like. And then we have the beautiful postcard for the Turtle Road Watch, Wildlife Road Watch. So take as many as you like and share them among your colleagues, your friends, other students. So once again, thank you for everyone who put so much effort into this conference, especially Jessica Deacon. You were amazing. And the last thanks go to you all for coming and participating and supporting the biosphere. So thank you.